Time to wake up. It's Saturday morning. Find some milk and cereal. Grab a bowl and spoon. No, a bigger spoon. Head to the living room and take a seat on the floor while Joseph and Chris present to you Saturday Morning Cartoon!
Hello everybody and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoon Boo! I never know where to go with that.
Yeah, you like lately you kind of do the same thing. Or ooh, and then you follow it up with something weird like,
It's aftershock.
It was kind of like you weren't sure.
Yeah, that explosion was a little. It was inquiring whether it was allowed to explode.
Yeah, it didn't know.
For anybody first listening, this is a show where we wake up with a Saturday morning sun and plop down on the living room floor with a big bowl of sugary cereal and watch all your favorite cartoons, both old and new. And I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
And this morning we watched Xiaolin Showdown.
This was suggested by Fratomon via YouTube.
Fratomon also suggested Arthur, and we loved that one. And so far, he's been 100% because, spoiler alert, this one was awesome too.
Yeah, it really was. I was so surprised, but we'll get there.
So the show Xiaolin Showdown aired from 2003 to 2006, created by Christy Wee, produced by Warner Brothers Animation, ran for 3 seasons, 52 episodes on the Kids WB network. For a short synopsis, a young Shaolin monk named Omi with a giant yellow head, and I'm reading this verbatim, with a giant yellow head, leads a trio of other students to collect powerful items known as Shen Gong Wu, while battling the evil Jack Spicer, who is also after the artifacts.
Yeah, that is very true.
I don't know why they had to mention his giant yellow head.
Well, that's kind of the elephant in the room. Is I was wondering the entire time why he is the only character like drawn with a very different colored skin and that he's yellow. And I'm like, is this? He's very jaundiced.
Could be. Yeah.
He has really poorly developed kidneys. Is it kidneys or liver?
Liver. Wait.
Okay. Wait.
Liver. Yes.
Yes.
Wait.
We're doctors. We're doctors. He has really poorly developed lidneys.
Lidneys. There you go.
Yeah, that's the real organ.
A lidney. So, Chris, who are some of the actors who played in this show?
There's quite a few. And the more and more I saw the cast, I got more and more excited because there's so many good ones. First of all, our star of the show, Omi, was voiced by Tara Strong, which we've talked about her on this show before, famous for voicing Barbara Gordon and also Harley Quinn in the Arkham game series, Bubbles from Powerpuff Girls, Timmy from Fairly Odd Parents, and so much more. And I am totally in love with this lady. Yeah. Seriously, I love Tara Strong.
Hello Kitty from...
And Hello Kitty. She was the original voice of Hello Kitty when she was a teenager. The voice of Kimiko was Gray Delisle, also known as Gray Griffin, depending on if you're looking at Wikipedia or her own Twitter. She uses different names. It's very confusing. Another voice actress crush of mine, she was the voice of Azula in Avatar The Last Airbender, Vicky in Fairly Odd Parents, Mandy from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and Aya in the Green Lantern animated series, and she's had so much more. These 2 women are pretty much A-listers in the voice acting world. They are in everything, and they are super talented. Raymundo was voiced by Tom Kenny, who is the voice also of Cat Dog, the mayor and narrator from Powerpuff Girls, Starscream and Waspinator in the Transformers animated show, but mostly known for the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Then we have the voice of Clay, which was Jeff Bennett, and he's had a role in pretty much every cartoon from Cartoon Network and Kids WB from the 90s, mostly known for being the voice of Johnny Bravo, but we've also seen him in the Green Lantern series as Tomar Ray. He also has lots of roles in Transformers Animated, including Ultra Magnus, Prowl, and Soundwave. And he's still doing so many newer shows that I'm sure we'll keep seeing his name pop up. The voice of Dojo was Wayne Knight, who has done some voice acting, but he's way more known for his live action roles including his recurring role on Seinfeld and for playing Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. So everybody's seen
Didn't
this
say
guy.
The magic word.
Yes, exactly. That guy. Master Feng in season 1 was voiced by Renee Auberjonois, who has done a lot of voice acting for Marvel and DC cartoons, mostly known for his live action playing Ordo in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But you've definitely heard his voice. Joseph, he was the Skull from The Last Unicorn.
Oh, cool.
And he was the cook from the Little Mermaid movie who sings the song Le Poisson as he's trying to cook Sebastian while like the little crab's trying to hide and stuff.
Yeah.
In season 2 and subsequently 3, Master Fung's voiced by Maurice LaMarche, who's another regular we've had on this show a lot. He was in Tiny Toon Adventures, G.I. Joe, Batman the Animated Series. He voiced Egon from The Real Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters, and he's the voice of Brain from Pinky and the Brain. The character of Jack Spicer was voiced by Danny Cooksey, which I've seen this name before, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I saw the other stuff that he's done. He was the voice of Montana Max in Tiny Toon Adventures, which I was like, I recognize this voice. But to kids that grew up in the 90s, you'd probably recognize his face for playing Bobby Budnick in the Nickelodeon show Salute Your Shorts. He's the redhead mullet kid.
Oh.
During the song where he yells, "It makes me wanna fart."
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Wu Ya was voiced by Susan Silo. He's had a lot of animation and live action roles, cartoons. She usually does side characters, but one that stood out to me was Emma Frost, the White Queen, in the animated movie Pride of the X-Men, and returned to voice the White Queen in the arcade game that followed that.
Oh, sweet.
And then finally, Chase Young was voiced by Jason Matson, who, like Susan, he's done a lot of TV and voiceovers, mostly doing side characters. He's mostly known for appearing live action in General Hospital for several years, and he was the voice of Binks from the movie Hocus Pocus, you know, the cat, which also features our friend Doug.
Yay. That was a big cast, and some of those were really interesting, and I didn't even know. The only one that I knew of was Wayne Knight and Tara Strong. I knew about those two, but that's it. The rest, good surprises.
Yeah.
So for a few tasty marshmallows out of our big bowl of Xiaolin cereal, the series creator Christy Wee has stated that despite the growing popularity of anime in the United States, she preferred to create a show that was a fusion of Eastern and Western culture. And I think she successfully did so here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's got a lot of the influences from Eastern art, action, philosophy, magic, things like that.
Yeah.
With a great touch of, Western comedy to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, especially the character of Omi reminds me of a blend of Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender, which was an American show, and then young Goku from the original Dragon Ball.
I could see that.
Like a perfect blend of those two.
Like this, on the surface, this looks like it could be an anime, but it's when you watch it that you're like, okay, it's not quite an anime. So also, there was never a serial made of this, but it was advertised on other serials, had a trading card game and a video game come out for the PS2. So there was a lot of other merchandising for this show. I don't think they ever had toys though, somehow.
I don't think I've ever seen any.
It seems like it'd be a perfect candidate for toys.
Especially, because you could have an action figure with a big yellow head.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, who wouldn't want that? Oh, that is prime for like a Funko Pop figure.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically perfect. He's basically a Funko Pop figure already.
Exactly.
So they wouldn't have to do much. On September 2013, a continuation of the series, Shaolin Chronicles, premiered. And the series was a standalone that was not canon to Showdown, featuring new allies, some new characters, and new enemies. But it still kind of followed the same timeline as far as still fighting, Wu Ya, Jack Spicer, Chase Young, things like that. And a third series is still being planned that's going to continue Showdown currently.
Weird. So is Chronicles then almost like an alternate universe with the same characters or something?
Kind of slightly different characters, addition of new characters, and removal of some, but it's something that's going to be like a standalone. It's only only a single season, but they're still talking about bringing out a third series that is a continuation. So basically, a season 4 plus of Showdown.
That seems so like a really weird way to do it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the bureaucracy went into it, like why they couldn't just directly continue it. It might have been ownership of property or something.
That, or like I would guess that they felt like a demand for it to come back. So they tried to do it as like a reboot thing, which was what Chronicles would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then people were like, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted the continuation of the series we already loved. So now they're like, oh, I get it. Okay, you didn't want a reboot. You wanted a sequel. Okay, we'll do a sequel now.
Yeah, which is still weird because that's
it's really
2013,
weird.
7 years after the first series ended. So,
but that shows this show had a really big following, and like I would have had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like this really, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but it really kind of slipped under my radar as a kid. Or I wasn't even a kid when it came out, I guess. I was graduating high school, but at that point, I completely had no idea about it.
Right.
The Dragon of Fire is named Kimiko. The Asian character Ko is shaped like a K with a line at the side, means fire. So that's why that makes sense.
I actually do know that.
Yeah, the name of the Dragon of Wind is Raimundo. Rai means thunder in Japanese. And through season 2 of the show, Raimundo's main attack is called Typhoon Boom, which sounds like thunder. So, and then Dragon of Earth named Clay, and that just kind of speaks for itself. Earth, clay, soil.
That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Chris, what do you remember about this show?
I had never watched it, but I did know that it existed. I remember seeing advertisements for it, and all I knew is it was like, okay, it's a WB cartoon, which like when I was a kid, I loved WB cartoons when I was young, but you know, as I got older, I stopped watching that kind of stuff, and I kind of had the attitude of, you know, I liked all the shows that were on originally, and then they would slowly get replaced by new shows, and I'm like, man, I'm not gonna watch this junk. Like, forget that. So I kind of wrote a lot of stuff off, and this was one of them. I just, like, the only thing I knew about it was the kid with the big yellow head.
It's kind of the same. I do remember seeing commercials about it, but I think that I just kind of pushed it to the side because Jackie Chan Adventures had come out about 3 years earlier. So I was like, oh, this is just going to be like a cheap knockoff of Jackie Chan Adventures is what it seemed like on the surface. And I liked Jackie Chan Adventures, or what I had seen of it at the time. So I was like, I just passed on it. I'm kind of sad I did now because it's not. It's similar in the sense that there's the Eastern and Western mixture, but the comedy is different, and it's really we'll talk about it. So let's go ahead and jump into the 3 episodes we watched for today's show. Very first episode, highest rated episode, and finally, random listener chosen episode. Order may vary depending on how these episodes fall chronologically, but of course we have to start with the very first episode being The Journey of 1,000 Miles, Season 1, Episode 1, where Omi, a young Shaolin dragon in training, is joined at the Shaolin Temple by 3 new students, Kimiko, Raimundo, and Clay.
What were your first impressions of all the kids?
I didn't really know what to expect because you don't really get a sense of their character much from their introductions. I was happy to see that Clay was Texan. So I was
hey, I didn't even think about that.
Representing.
You're like, yes.
Finally.
What'd you think about Omi when you first were introduced to his character?
Omi, he reminded me of a few other goofy characters, like you were saying, especially Aang from Avatar.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I didn't know what to think aside from his color being drastically different from everyone else's.
Right. Racist.
What about you? What'd you think?
So yeah, like the way I described Omi, I mean, is how I felt right off the bat. Immediately, I did not like most of the other kids. And you know what? I never grew to really like Raimundo, even though like we've only watched 3 episodes, but I never ended up liking his character. Kimiko, the first few scenes, I was like, wow, she's gonna be so obnoxious, because she was in the first few scenes, because she was just constantly texting and talking on the phone to her friend, Which they did a few gags with it, which was kind of funny because like Raimundo like depantsed Omi at the one point, and Kimiko's just like telling her friend, like basically narrating what's happening and laughing about it. But I was like, oh, that's gonna get old so quick. So I'm really glad that they didn't carry that forward.
Well, she's an interesting character in that she kind of changes every few episodes. Like she's kind of atypical to usual characters who keep the same clothes and the same hairstyle and everything throughout the series. Like she had a different one almost every episode we watched. She looked a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even realize that she wasn't blonde based on the first episode.
She was wearing a wig or something.
Yeah.
And because it was later that episode that when they get in their robes and stuff and they don't have all of their, home accessories and stuff, that she's got black hair. I was like, oh, okay. Her real personality came out because she starts out being super superficial. And later, 10, 15 minutes later into the episode, Raimundo's still being a bully. That's what he basically is, kind of like a alpha dog bully kind of guy. And Kimiko sticks up for Omi a couple times against him, just says, don't mess with the monk kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Which she carries that forward. But I was surprised there, and I really like that because it made me think differently. It was one of those things that makes me challenge how I perceive things in the real world. Like, don't judge a book by its cover, because the first few seconds of her talking, I was like, I don't like her. And, 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, no, she's actually, deeper than that. So kudos to the writers for pulling that off.
Yeah, that's something that can really be said about this show, is the character development's kind of top notch. It's for what seems like it would just be a really straightforward kind of actiony, fun, laughy show. They have a lot of depth to them. They're not flawless like some action characters are. They're flawed individuals, and that helps to flesh out their characters and makes them all diverse and interesting.
I'd say Clay is the only one that I don't have a good read on, because he doesn't seem to have a very wide range of emotion. He's very quiet. And when he does talk, it's just kind of like not dopey, but he speaks very simply. And he's just kind of really chill about everything. Like, oh, relax, partner kind of thing. And just kind of doing his thing, He's kind of like a big softie, like a big teddy bear. So, but, this is coming from just watching 3 episodes, so he might have had some sort of story arc that I haven't seen yet.
That's true, yeah.
So I'm not saying that he's underdeveloped. I'm just saying, in what we watched, I don't have a good feeling for what his kind of character is, aside from, like you said, just kind of a teddy bear, he's just kind of there, and you don't really get a feel for if he leans a certain way as far as how he feels about things.
Yeah, it's basically, if you had to describe him, it'd be like cowboy, tech girl, and cool kid. And that's kind of those 3 characters in a nutshell. We also get to see Dojo, the small dragon, who's very much like Mushu from Mulan, if you've ever seen that movie. But he's just kind of the temple guardian dragon, I guess. His full name's Dojo Komojo Cho, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, that is funny. Try to say that really fast.
Yeah, no way. I'm not going to try.
Was it Dojo Komojo Cho?
No. Cho. Yeah, Dojo Komojo Cho.
Dojo Komojo Cho. Nice. I like it.
They get kind of thrown into the mix pretty quick. Omi is supposed to assist in training these other students. He is, as it states in the description, a Shaolin dragon to be. And a dragon is sort of kind of the high ranks of Shaolin monks.
Right.
And that is what he's striving for. And these are students, I guess, who have just come in to become dragons, but need to be trained by Omi and the master.
At least Omi thinks so.
Yeah, that's what Omi is. That's the way it's introduced to him.
Yeah, that's what he believes is what's going on, that he's supposed to be training them. There's a lot of really good moments, especially because things happen to Omi from these others, such as, Raimundo depantses him at one time, and gets laughs out of everybody. There's another time where Kimiko is playing a video game and Omi doesn't understand it and tries to play it. And he gets very attached to the video game character really quickly, but accidentally turns the game off, and he like panics because he's worried about his new friend inside the game. And she's like, no, you just hit the off switch.
My little friend has been taken by the forces of evil.
Then he gets some advice from Clay, because Clay's a big guy, and it's something like, it's not how big you are, it's like how you throw your weight around or something like that.
Yeah, it's how you use your weight or something.
Yeah. And what's cool is about these are all things that seem unconsequential, but all three of those things come back in a big way later in the episode.
Yeah, which is really good. It's not just useless information, it's foreshadowing. And yeah, they definitely utilize it well. We get to see at least at this point, the primary villain who comes in, which is Jack Spicer. I don't know, a spoiled supervillain kid. Yeah,
exactly.
He gets a puzzle box from his father in Hong Kong, and he opens it kind of like in a Hellraiser-like fashion. And what comes out is Wuya, a spirit woman. Basically, it's kind of like it's a mask that's in the box. And within that mask, I guess, is held the spirit of Wuya, who is the enemy to the Shaolin Temple.
Another monk, I guess centuries ago, was able to seal her in that box because she was evil and she posed a danger to the entire world. So only her spirit is released. Like you said, it's a mask with almost like ghostly purple flowing hair coming out of it.
Yeah.
That she just floats around. She has no corporeal form. She's giving Jack Spicer advice, like kind of getting him to do her bidding, but he's really bad at it.
Oh yeah, he's a terrible villain, just a bad henchman. He's funny though. Like there are good comedy moments to him.
Yeah,
good
everybody in the show is funny, and
in some way, yeah.
And what I like is that nobody in this show, except for Master Feng, are very bright. Everyone else is just not all there for one reason or another.
Yeah, it's kind of oblivious to certain things that are going on.
I take that back. Kimiko is pretty intelligent, but she makes a lot of mistakes.
Well, she's tech savvy, but she's also hot-headed. I mean, since her sign is fire, she's quick to react to things.
And all of the kids, they kind of let their ego get in the way a tiny bit. Like they think they can handle more than they really can, and that causes them to make mistakes quite often.
And what their goal is in this episode, and really throughout the season, is to chase after these Shen Gong Wu artifacts, like we had talked about. In this one, we've got the Mantis Flip coin, which is just a coin that lets you jump really high. And that's the thing, I guess, to describe them a little bit. When you hold on to these artifacts, they all have magical properties of some sort that you can utilize, but only when you are holding on to the artifact. And the villains, and they've all been sealed away in various places around the world. There's hundreds of them, apparently. And the villain's goal, of course, is to get them to obtain just to rule the earth and obtain more power. And the hero's primary goal is to get them in order to keep the villain from getting them and to utilize them to assist in stopping the villains.
Right. So basically, if the villains, like the more the villains get their hands on it, the more powerful these villains become. So both sides are just hardcore after as many of the Shen Gong Wu as they can get.
The name of the show really comes into play, and it helped me kind of understand why it was called this. When more than one person touches one of the Shen Gong Wu artifacts at the same time, they have to start what is called a Xiaolin Showdown, where they're kind of put into a bubble where they have to go through these competitions in order to basically place bets on who's going to end up with this artifact as well as a single other artifact offering in order to place their bet.
Right.
So we get to see that in this episode where whoever reaches the last stone first gets both of them. Omi is handicapped because he has this armor on called a 2-ton tunic.
Oh, yeah.
What it does is it's literally a tunic that looks incredibly heavy, but he's invulnerable, but he's also super heavy.
Right. Which is funny because the trial that comes up that he has to do against Jack is jumping from these like large pillars, in basically a race, and he can barely even stand up with that heavy armor on because he's very tiny, except for his really, giant head.
Right. It's Jack's Spicer's hubris that kind of keeps him from winning this anyway, because he's just kind of taking his time. It's almost a turtle in the hair or tortoise in the hair type race.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Really seems like there's no way Omi could win.
Yeah, Jack gets way too cocky and tries to antagonize and poke fun at Omi, and Omi ends up basically getting the upper hand and winning. So the person we haven't talked about much is Master Feng, who is the head of the temple, who's training everybody. He's not quiet, but it's like whenever he talks, he only speaks with purpose. Like anytime he speaks with the students, they're learning something, Like
it's very Master Splinter-esque.
Yeah, he's moving the plot along, or he's teaching them a lesson and stuff. And he kind of reveals at the end of this episode, because Omi was like, oh yeah, like I was able to teach them all these things, and Master Feng's like, you're not here to teach them, they're here to teach you. And that's where all the things that come in, because all three of those things I mentioned earlier that happened to Omi from each of the three kids are things that he remembers during the trial, during the showdown, and uses to win. Like one of the last things he does to win is like de-pantsing Jack Spicer, and like pulls his pants down and then gets past him and stuff.
What's interesting about that, and what I really liked about the episode as a whole, is that yes, they are there to teach him, but in kind of an abstract way, where he was born and raised kind of in this temple and as a monk. So from birth, he's been doing this, and he's been really sheltered from the outside world. Whereas the opposite is true for these kids who all have, they come from diverse backgrounds. One is Japanese, one is Brazilian, and one is American. And so there's different culture that they're getting to share with Omi. In this case, it's a kind of comical stuff, but also throughout the course of the series, I'm sure there's much more that they can teach him about their culture and help diversify his knowledge, which I thought was a really smart way to approach that.
Yeah, that's the part of him that reminds me of like young Goku, is that Omi's very naive about the rest of the world.
Right.
Like how Goku didn't realize there were different genders, things like that, which he finds out a really creepy way, and I won't get into it until we end up watching that on the show one of these days. But
right, which will happen.
It'll happen. It was a very cool first episode, because it totally took my preconceived ideas of this cartoon and turned it completely around.
Yeah, and that's immediately starting out first episode.
Yeah.
All your perceptions are just kind of flipped, and it helps you. It really preps you and gets you excited to watch the rest of it. I know I was.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's very intelligently written.
Right.
And not on the surface. Like, you don't go in thinking, yeah, this is really smart. It's like at the end, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you're like, even I learned something.
Yeah, you're like, oh man, this is way deeper than you think. So
yeah, exactly. So that jumps us over to the second episode we watched for today's show, Enter the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 7, which was chosen by Fratomon. Once every 1,500 years, Dojo must be locked up for 24 hours. If he gets out, he will travel the globe, devouring every Shen Gong Wu he can find, along with everything else in his path.
That is very true. My gosh.
Yeah.
Dude, like, Dojo's kind of scary in this episode. Yeah. Like, he's really scary.
Yes, he's so... What's the scariest part is, on the offset, you get that description. It's like, oh man, like that's scary enough. But then he's so deceptive. Like and Omi's so naive that it's like, this is gonna go bad. This is gonna go poorly.
Yeah.
Right away.
The episode starts out with him building almost like a little doghouse looking thing for himself. But,
a pin.
Yeah. With like a locked door and things, because he knows what's going to happen.
It's very much like a wolf, like a werewolf who they see the full moon. They're trying to, imprison themselves so they don't hurt anyone. Someone.
Yeah. So he's basically doing that. And I love when one of the kids asks Master Feng, like what happened last time Dojo got out, because he does say Dojo got out at one time. So they're asking, oh, what happened? And he's like, Atlantis. And I was like, oh man, like that was a great joke. And like, also at the same time, they're telling you just how bad of a situation it could be. Like he destroyed an entire civilization and the city's completely lost to history.
Yeah, and we get kind of a small preview of what he is capable of once he inevitably does escape, since I mean, he tries a lot of different things and Omi isn't falling for them, but then he pulls like one of the most basic tricks in the book where he kind of hides on the top of the pin and asks Omi to get him something. He looks in, sees nothing, so he, of course, opens the door as, I don't know, I wouldn't. And this, I've seen enough movies and shows to know that that's a bad idea, but he opens the door, he's like, where could he have gone? And then gets locked in the pin himself, and
Dojo escapes.
Yeah, crap hits the fan at that point.
So the other three kids were sent by Master Feng to go look for a close by Shen Gong Wu that showed up, because they have like a little radar thing that Kimiko hangs onto that tells them where they're located. So Omi was ready to go, but instead Master Feng put him in charge of watching Dojo. And anyway, so the other three take their Shen Gong Wu of their own to go collect this one in case Jack Spicer shows up. They've got, they each have an artifact to fight him. But the artifact that Jack Spicer had with him was like a magnet kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it basically not only grabbed the one he was after, but also took all of theirs. So they went after trying to recover one and end up losing all four in their possession. So they return a failure to find Omi locked in the cage, also a failure. So everybody's screwed up, which was hilarious.
So Dojo has grown an additional head at this point. I mean, I guess and evil Dojo.
Huge.
And he's turned into his giant form. This is something that he's capable of doing even when he's good, is growing larger. Yeah. And he acts as a transport for them, much in the same way that I can't remember the giant dog's name in Neverending Story, but he's basically a large transport for them. And instead they have to use a big ship called the Silver Manta Ray or something. Yeah. And to get around this episode.
One of my favorite parts of this episode was when they all realize Dojo's out. Master Feng is like, oh, this is not good. And one of them's like, well, how bad is it really? And then there's a giant mushroom cloud explosion in the background and the screen turns, or the sky turns like green, and just, I was like, oh man.
Yeah, that was a good gag. I mean, a terrifying gag, but a good one.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, he starts to. Okay, even Wuya, the evil witch,
is terrified.
She's terrified of him. Like, everyone knows, like, this is bad. Like, this is really bad. What's just happened? She's freaking out, and then he starts eating people. Like, and I mean, of course, it's a cartoon. They're not going to be dead.
It threw me off, though.
Yeah, me too. Because I was like, "What is this? Like a dream or something? Like, did he just eat them?" And then not only that, but he eats like all the kids, and and Master Feng, and then all that's left is Omi. And I'm like, okay, well, somehow Omi's going to do this, and then he gets eaten too. And I'm like,
everyone got eaten.
Yeah.
One thing that I really liked that happened before this was it just kind of reiterates how bad Jack Spicer is at being a bad guy, which is he's like working on this like rocket ship, I guess like a jet, but it's shaped weird, like almost like a blimp or almost like the Futurama space shuttle, like that weird shape. And Wu Ya's like kind of talking about this Shen Gong Wu that's nearby. She's like, oh, this is great. We can get it. Like, even you can't screw this up. As he manages to do something inside the ship, it falls over on its side and crashes, shoots a missile, and blows the roof off of their hideout. Like, and I mean, and this happens in a matter of like seconds, just all of this stuff.
I thought it was kind of clever the way that Omi was able to escape Dojo, where the Shen Gong Wu changing chopsticks, which allows him to turn himself like much smaller, like not microscopic, but very small, to the point where he's able to be sweated out. Like, don't they start a fire inside of Dojo or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while they're inside Dojo, like, so, you know, they're in his stomach and stuff, and it's just constant fart noises. Like, never ending farts the entire time they're inside there, which is hilarious.
Since they lit the fire in there and are starting to get him sweating, Omi gets into one of Dojo's pores and is sweated out of his body, where he challenges Dojo to a Xiaolin Showdown, and it's who captures who first. So they're running through this canyon, and I really like the way that this played out, where he uses two different artifacts, the reversing mirror and the Shroud of Shadows. And what he ends up doing is, well, he's using the reversing mirror to kind of deflect Dojo's blast, and he is able to put the Shroud of Shadows, like, makes himself disappear at first, and then we don't, you know, unknown to us, Dojo's there about to, you know, make the finishing blow or like swoop down on him, and he reveals that pin, the cell that Dojo had made previously, was also hidden by the Shroud of Shadows, and he ends up falling right back into it, and he traps him. I didn't even suspect that's what was happening, so that's what's really good about it, is it caught me by surprise.
Yeah, I had no idea where it was going. I'm like, how is he going to trap him? And then you're like, I see.
I think that's really good storytelling there. Is it gives you know enough about the show to where you're like, okay, I understand, you know, the premise of what's happening, but I don't know how he's going to get out of this one. And it's not predictable, and that's a really strong thing to say about a cartoon that can appeal to both kids and adults.
And what's really cool too is, like, at least with the pin and with the show in general, they give you clues as to how things are going to unfold, but they're not obvious. Like, everything you need to know what's going to happen is there. You know, you've got different artifacts, you have other plot elements in place, but you don't connect the dots until they reveal it to you. And then you're like, oh, like the end of every episode is kind of like an epiphany.
Yeah, it's very surprising. And those elements, I mean, those, since there's so many of these Shen Gong Wu, it could easily become overwhelming, but they use them very tactically and in a clever way. And they're all useful to some extent. And that's really cool.
And there's specific ones that they use way more often than others, which makes sense, because if they do certain things, like the changing chopsticks is one that it seems like they use quite a bit. And it changes your size. So it makes sense that would be one to have handy, you know, to get in and out of tight spaces. So
right. That one's utilized more than some of the others, but I think it comes in play in the next episode too.
It does. Good segue.
The last episode we watched for today's show is Saving Omi, Season 2, Episode 26, which was the highest rated, and understandably so. I really like this episode. I'll tell you in a second.
Okay, I was going to just say, let me set the stage real quick, because I watched the episode before this.
Okay.
Because this was a two-parter. So I watched the episode before so that I knew what was going on. There's this other villainish guy named Chase Young, who's basically immortal and leans towards this evil magic called the Xiaolin. And he wants to rule the world, but he sees that Omi, given enough time, would become more powerful than him and would be able to stop him. So he figures the only way to be able to actually conquer the world the way he wants is to find a way to swing Omi to his side.
Right.
So some things happen. Master Feng has been kidnapped into this place called the Yin Yang world. Basically, there's two yo-yos that are the Shen Gong Wu to access the Yin Yang world. There's the Yang yo-yo and the Yin yo-yo. Omi gets a hold of one, gets to the Yin Yang world, grabs Master Feng, and comes back. No one else thought he should be going there alone, and he wasn't getting a lot of support from the other three. But Chase was kind of like, you can do this, I'll help you, and giving him support. So he comes back and he's like, you guys, he felt betrayed. He's like, you guys kind of turned on me. I don't need you, kind of thing. He basically accepts the Xiaolin side and joins Chase.
Well, he also comes back with the just the yin yo-yo.
Yeah,
which
just the
is
yin.
just the dark side of a person, or the evil side, kind of. And the same happens.
And they didn't know that. Yeah.
Right. They didn't know that at the time. And Master Feng comes out as well, but he puts himself into a meditative state, a trance, so that his evil side is unable to act, because both sides of him are in this trance, which I thought was a really clever thing to do. It's something a master like that would do. So
yeah, exactly. Like the good side is called their chi. And when you get into the yin yang world or whatever, I guess if you don't leave with both artifacts, you have to have both yo-yos to leave fully intact. If you don't do that, then your chi gets stored in like these bottles. Mm-hmm. So their good sides are trapped there and their bad sides came back. Master Feng is his is, tucked away, but Omi basically comes back evil and joins Chase and accepts the Halen side and becomes super powerful and super scary and plunges the world into 1,000 years of darkness.
Of course, which is kind of the theme of every episode. Right. That's what could happen.
And that was all the episode before this one. So that's not even the episode we watched. This is that was the predecessor.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of leading up to it. Yeah. And then something funny about the meditative state of Master Feng is that he is being taken care of, attended to by Dojo throughout the episode, and that's almost like a comic relief of a really what would otherwise be a pretty dark episode. He's feeding it. He puts a wig on him.
He's constantly dropping him, like knocking him over down the stairs.
He's not taking great care of him, but he's trying.
He bathes him. He tries to help shave him because Master Feng has a mustache and goatee, but Dojo accidentally shaves the goatee part off, and so he just has the mustache. So then, like, he's like trying to make up for it and puts like a wig on his head and all kinds of stuff. It's really funny.
And then we've got Dark Omi, who is very frightening. I mean, he's a small child, but he's also so full of energy, and
oh my gosh,
he wants to fight constantly. I mean, he says like if he didn't have to sleep, he'd fight 7/24.
Yeah, he's got like violent ADHD, basically.
Yeah, and he in his active state, he swears his loyalty to Chase Young just so he can fight. Jack Spicer's here, and he's begging to get back into the evil clan again because he's been kicked out by Chase Young and Wuya. This is where we get introduced to the Cyclops.
Oh, Cyclops, yeah.
Is hilarious. And he's like, all right, you can get back in, but first you have to change the Cyclops. He soiled himself again.
Yeah. Jack had assembled basically a team of bad guys. He had henchmen, but he ended up getting kicked out of his own group, and his henchmen and Wuya joined Chase. So Chase is now the big bad instead of Jack. And Jack is now an underling and like the lowest of the low. So Chase also, which is really awesome, has all these like tigers and some lions and other cats and stuff like that turn into warriors.
Cats. Right.
Oh man, they're so cool.
Yeah, that was cool. And then Chase himself can turn into some sort of like
it's like a lizard
reptile,
thing?
like a dragon type thing.
Yeah, it's almost like a Komodo dragon type, like anthropomorphic Komodo dragon.
His group turns into kind of like actual like jungle cats.
Right.
With Evil Omi finally confronting everybody, he's ready to fight, tells him to bring it off because he doesn't understand expressions really. That's something that's recurring throughout the episodes. Like, instead of bring it on, he just says bring it off. And everybody's losing to him because he's so full of power and energy.
And he looks scary as heck. Like he's got this big grin on his face the entire time. The other three dragons, the kids go to stop him, and he is like pounding the crap out of them and just smiling like maniacally as he does it.
And we get to see this other witch who's kind of summoned in, and I don't know her name completely. I can't remember what they had said, but the serpent's tail kind of summons her in, and she's left underpowered because she's not trusted.
That was Wuya.
Oh, that was Wuya?
Yeah, so
okay, so
Chase got this artifact to restore Wuya to her mortal form. Okay. but she didn't get all of her powers. Instead, Chase absorbed her powers because he said she couldn't be trusted.
Right. And I think she says like, okay, I would have done the same.
Yeah. So like she
understands.
was expecting to come back all powerful, but instead she just came back basically as immortal. So now she has to do his bidding because he's more powerful.
So the Xiaolin find out about the Yang Yo-Yo, like they get the entire story as we described it, where that's needed in order to go back into the Yin Yang world and retrieve the chi to restore Omi and Master Feng. And one of my favorite parts about this episode was when they use in trying to pursue this, they are also confronted by the Cyclops and some of the other enemies, the Jungle Cat warriors, and they use this Shen Gong Wu called the Sweet Baby Among Us.
Oh, yes.
That made me laugh so much because what it is, they don't even know what it is at first. They're just like, well, it's kind of all we got, so we have to use it.
It's like a little golden baby statue.
It's a little golden baby statue. Almost looks like a little Buddha statue. And they use it, and this giant gold baby comes out like crying. And then it starts throwing diapers at the enemies and wrapping them in diapers.
Shoots diapers.
Oh yeah,
from its diaper.
Out of its diaper, yeah. and it traps the enemies in those diapers, and then Cyclops tries to confront it, but it's like way taller than he is, and it smacks him away, and then starts beating his chest like King Kong.
Yeah, it's so good.
Man. That part was hilarious.
It really was. A lot of this episode was very serious, but it was like moments like that just completely caught you off guard, and they were so funny.
Yeah, it's good levity for a really dark episode.
And speaking of it being a dark episode, so they managed to get Master Feng and Omi's chi back from the Yin Yang world. They bring it back, but they have to, apply the chi back to Omi. And Omi is basically, almost like a killing machine at this point. So Raimundo and Clay are going to try to distract him while Kimiko uses the changing chopsticks to shrink herself down and go inside, basically into his brain, and release the chi inside of him. And Jack Spicer goes in too. They think to try to stop Kimiko, but something else happens. But the point I want to get to is that so Omi is fighting against Clay and Raimundo. It's kind of intense in this one part because he captures Raimundo and is like beating on him so bad that Raimundo starts to cry. I mean, and it's not like a, laughing, cowardly cry kind of thing. It is like he's crying because he's in pain. And it makes Omi pause for a split second.
Right. He has been pushed to the limit, Raimundo has, and he basically, if it hadn't got to the point that it got to, Omi would have killed him.
Absolutely, he was going to kill him for sure. So like that was a really powerful scene in a cartoon that is typically really funny and lighthearted. Like, I've talked about this before, that those are my favorite cartoons, the ones that are funny, but they still have these very, very, they can have these serious moments that really can give you goosebumps still, and that was definitely one of them. Like, it gave it a lot of weight, know? It made it emotional and raw.
Since earlier, Omi, when he was possessed, or not possessed, but when his evil side was acting on its own, since it swore its loyalty to Chase, even once he gets his chi back, Chase is like, as an honorable monk, you swore your loyalty to me, so you have to honor that. And closing out the episode, he's like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to go back. I have to, I swore my loyalty to Chase, and so that's where I have to be. And then it's another to be continued, and that's the end of the season.
And he turns Omi into a cat.
Oh yeah, he turns him into a different
like a
cat,
little yellow house cat.
One of his other cat warriors.
Right. So Omi, even with all of his wits back, stays with Chase, which is crazy.
And that was powerful too, because it's like, oh man, like that makes sense because he swore loyalty to him.
Right.
And something they honor above all else is
their word.
honor.
Yeah.
Exactly, their word.
One other thing that happened that was funny, but also cool, and it made me want to kind of see what happens in season 3, which was when Kimiko was in his head trying to release the chi.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Spicer shows up. He's in there too. And you think he's going to try to stop her. Instead, he does like everything he can to help her. And what we find out is because he went with them into the yin yang world, but he had the reversing mirror with him. So when he came back into this world, his evil side got left behind because he was supposed to be all evil when he went in. He didn't have good. So when he came back, because he had the reversing mirror, he came back all good and no evil. So now he's one of the good guys.
Yeah, which is an interesting usage of those Shen Gong Wu once again, like we were talking about.
Like they set it up to where it looks like he's going to kind of join the group, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, hopefully so. I mean, you never know. I'm sure something will happen
where he'll
turn back
easily.
But
like I feel like if they dethrone Chase, then that leaves an opening for Jack to come back.
Right, he'll go back to his same ways.
But he would have to become evil again. So
yeah. Well, Chris, I think it's about time we utilize our own Shen Gong Wu, the cereal spoon of time, to travel back to the past and find out what our inner kids thought of Xiaolin Showdown.
This cartoon was way cooler than I thought it would be. It was really funny, and there's all this cool fighting monk stuff, and evil magic, and a dragon that can be big or small, or have 2 heads and eat people. It's so cool. I give it 5 bowls of 1,000 Years of Darkness cereal out of 5. And now I will begin my training as the Dragon of Heart. That's an element, right? Captain Planet said it was. Just kidding. I'd rather be the Dragon of Fart. Presenting to the audience an excellent blend of Western comedy and Eastern culture, I found myself laughing at the gags almost as much as I was intrigued by the lore. Not only that, but this show's memorable characters with relatably flawed personalities helped bring these over-the-top adventures a little more down to earth. Learning that this was continued on with another series and has a potential upcoming 3rd series, I'm definitely interested in seeing what else this show has to offer. I give Xiaolin Showdown 5 big bowls of Sweet Baby Among Us cereal out of 5, and I highly recommend you give this one a shot. Gong Yi Tanpai!
I love the baby. That's so funny.
If I had any of those artifacts, that would probably be the one I chose. I'd regret it later because I'd get tired of it, but...
So do you have any final thoughts about Xiaolin Showdown?
I just think that this show is something that even if you don't think you'll like it because it might seem... The animation style doesn't make it seem like it's going to be a very serious show, but it has some serious elements to it. But it's also blended so well with the comedy that you get a great balance of both. It's like, it's not super serious, but it's also not super comedic all the time. It's a good show for both adults and children alike, and something I think that they could definitely enjoy together. So I'm probably going to watch the rest of this one. I'm very surprised still by how much I liked it and how good it was. And I think there's a lot of depth to it that doesn't seem like it would have on the surface.
Yeah, I completely agree. This was way more than I expected it to be. It had all the elements of what I enjoy in these kind of cartoons. There's some comedy, there's a lot of depth and history to the world. Like you said, there's a lot of lore. I mean, Joseph, as you know, that's usually my thing. That's what sucks me in. And, it mixes with some very serious moments, even though it's really funny most of the time. And there's a lot of high stakes situations, peppered among a sea of jokes. And, I can't say 100% for sure that I'm going to go back and watch it, but I'm curious enough to definitely at least get into season 3. I feel like I would probably end up watching it at some point, but I have to at least find out what happens in this story, whether it's reading about it or watching it. So yeah, I'm very intrigued, and I'm excited for us to do the follow-up shows as well.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say is even if I don't end up watching the rest of this first series, once the 3rd series comes out, much in the same way Voltron has, I'll keep up with that one. So thanks, Fratomon, for bringing us this. I mean, you've got free reign to choose whatever from now on because you've been 100%. I don't know. I think we might have rated Arthur 5s also. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think we rated Arthur pretty high. If it wasn't 5, it was close to it.
Yeah, it was still a very positive score.
Yeah.
So, your ace is in my book, Fratomon.
Aces.
Well, listeners, looks like our milk supply has now run dry, so it's time for us to say goodbye. Next week, we'll be watching
Life with Louie, submitted via Facebook by Jason.
Once again, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll see you next Saturday.
Presented by Nerdsloth.
A place for lazy nerds.
If you like what you heard, consider donating at patreon.com/nerdsloth so we can continue bringing you quality shows. Be sure to also leave us a review and share your favorite episodes and clips on social media. If you're looking for more content, visit us at nerdsloth.com.